The Earth, once a cradle of innovation and culture, had been ravaged by decades of war. Overpopulation, dwindling resources, and the relentless expansion of corrupt governments had pushed the planet to the brink of collapse. Every corner of the globe was embroiled in conflict, as nations turned on each other in a desperate struggle to survive. But the wars weren't just fought by humans. The Earth had unknowingly attracted the attention of alien species, intelligent beings far beyond humanity's technological reach. These invaders, each more powerful than the last, descended upon Earth like a swarm of locusts. The first wave was brutal, an army of insectoid creatures that swiftly overwhelmed the planet's defenses. They decimated the human population, leaving only pockets of survivors. The second wave came in the form of a towering, crystalline race that seemed invincible. Their weaponry was beyond human comprehension, and their soldiers were made of living, unbreakable stone. Humanity's armies were decimated time and time again, and it seemed like extinction was inevitable. In the final stages of this grim conflict, a group of surviving humans, a collective of scientists, engineers, and military commanders, came together in secret. In their desperation, they realized that their only chance for survival was not to fight the invaders with brute force but to adapt, to become something greater than what they were. They had long understood the power of the mind, but they had yet to unlock its true potential. Now, with extinction staring them in the face, they made the radical decision to enhance human physiology beyond its natural limitations. The project, known as Ascension, was born out of this necessity. Using alien technology scavenged from the fallen invaders, humanity's best minds embarked on an ambitious plan. They developed a series of genetic modifications and cybernetic enhancements that would turn ordinary humans into beings capable of rivaling the power of their alien adversaries. At first, the changes were subtle. Volunteers were chosen for their strength of will and intellect, and their bodies were slowly altered, genetically enhanced muscles, heightened senses, and expanded cognitive capabilities. The early results were promising, though not yet transformative. These enhanced humans, known as the Ascendants, formed a new military force. They were faster, smarter, and stronger than any human soldier before them. But despite their improvements, they still couldn't defeat the alien invaders. The tide of war was still turning against them. But humanity's scientists were not done. They realized that the real potential lay in the human mind. If they could push the boundaries of thought, unlock the latent psychic powers that lay dormant within the human brain, they might stand a chance. This decision would change everything. A second wave of genetic modifications was introduced, focused on psychic augmentation. Those who underwent this phase of ascension developed incredible telepathic and telekinetic abilities. With these new powers, the Ascendants could move objects with their minds, communicate over vast distances, and, most crucially, manipulate the energy around them to create devastating weapons. The first test was explosive, literally. One Ascendant, an unassuming scientist named Cassandra, accidentally detonated a building with nothing but the power of her mind. The shockwaves reverberated through the city, and the world stood still in awe. The war was about to enter a new phase. As the Ascendants grew more powerful, so did their understanding of the alien invaders. They learned that these creatures weren't just mindless conquerors, they were the product of a long-forgotten experiment by a race of beings who saw themselves as gods. The invaders, it turned out, were the result of a twisted desire to evolve, to create perfect beings through ruthless selection and experimentation. But they had forgotten one thing: humans, despite their flaws, were uniquely adaptable. They could grow in ways no alien species could understand. The Ascendants began to push back, fighting not just with weapons, but with their minds. As they tore through alien fortresses with telekinetic fury, they realized they weren't just defending Earth, they were proving a point. Humanity, the species once considered weak and unremarkable, was defying all odds. They were becoming something more, something the invaders couldn't even comprehend. But with power came danger. The more humanity unlocked the potential of their enhanced minds, the more they began to question the morality of their actions. Were they becoming gods? Or were they simply becoming monsters? These were questions that would plague the Ascendants as they prepared for the final confrontation with the invaders. The first stage of ascension had made them formidable. But it was only the beginning. The war that had started with humanity on the brink of extinction was about to enter its final, most brutal chapter. A chapter where the line between godhood and madness would be tested like never before. The first taste of victory was intoxicating, but it came at a cost. As humanity's ascendants became stronger, so did their isolation. Ordinary humans, struggling to survive in the ruins of cities now occupied by alien forces, began to look at the ascendants with a mixture of awe, fear, and resentment. The power that the ascendants wielded seemed godlike, teleporting across battlefields, creating shields of energy to block laser blasts, and disintegrating alien soldiers with a single thought. But as their powers grew, so did the divide between them and the rest of humanity. In the underground resistance movements, there was a growing unease. The ascendants were humanity's last hope, but what if they began to see themselves as more than human? What if their minds, so enhanced by alien technology, began to view the world through a different lens, one where they no longer saw themselves as protectors, but rulers? As tensions rose, whispers of rebellion began to spread, even among the ranks of the Ascendants themselves. A faction of Ascendants, led by the once idealistic scientist Cassandra, began to question their role in the war. Were they fighting for humanity's survival, or for their own ascendancy? Meanwhile, the alien invaders, now aware of the unprecedented threat posed by the Ascendants, began to take more drastic measures. The crystalline race, known as the Zarek, had already been forced to retreat from the initial waves of conflict. But they were not so easily defeated. Their queen, a being whose intellect was unmatched, began to devise a countermeasure, a way to harness the very power that had elevated humanity to godlike status. She believed that if she could capture an ascendant and study their enhanced minds, she could replicate the process, creating an army of beings even more powerful than humanity's finest. The Zarek began to develop a new weapon, one that would target the ascendant's psychic abilities. They created a series of massive towers, capable of generating a psychic dampening field strong enough to nullify the powers of even the most gifted ascendant. These towers, once operational, would turn the tide of the war in the invaders' favor. But humanity had one advantage the Zarek could never predict: the Ascendants' ability to adapt. A small group of Ascendants, including Cassandra, set out on a dangerous mission to infiltrate the heart of the Zarek Empire. Their objective was clear: disable the psychic dampening towers before they could be activated, and to confront the Zarek Queen herself. But they knew that failure would mean the end of their species. The stakes had never been higher. In the shadows, dissent within the Ascendants' ranks continued to grow. The line between heroism and hubris blurred. Some Ascendants, who had once been ordinary soldiers, began to see themselves as gods. They wanted more: control, power, a new world order. They saw Cassandra and her faction as weak, as clinging to outdated ideals of humility and selflessness. This schism threatened to tear apart the Ascendants from within, even before they could reach the Zarek capital. Cassandra, torn between loyalty to her fellow Ascendants and a growing distrust of their power, found herself facing an impossible choice: should she continue to lead the Ascendants in their mission to save humanity, or should she use their newfound strength to assert her own control over the future of Earth? The question haunted her, as it haunted every Ascendant who had gained the power to reshape reality itself. The war, once a fight for survival, had evolved into something far more dangerous. The Ascendants were no longer just humanity's defenders; they were becoming a force that could rewrite the very fabric of existence. And the invaders, recognizing this, began to realize that their greatest enemy wasn't humanity. It was the Ascendants themselves. The question now was: could humanity's last hope survive its own potential for tyranny? Would the Ascendants remain the protectors of Earth, or would they become the gods that led it into an age of domination? As the war escalated, the answer would not come from the weapons they wielded, but from the hearts and minds of those who had been forever changed by the power they sought to wield. The mission to destroy the Zarek psychic dampening towers was humanity's last hope for survival, and it came at a steep price. As Cassandra and her faction of Ascendants infiltrated the heart of the Zarek Empire, the lines between loyalty and ambition began to blur even further. The tension within the Ascendant ranks was palpable, with some members questioning the very foundation of their mission. Was this truly about saving humanity, or was it about asserting control over the Earth itself? Cassandra, now leading a fractured group of Ascendants, had tried to keep unity among them. But the constant whispers of rebellion and the insatiable thirst for power were impossible to ignore. Each day, as the team approached their target, the rift between those loyal to the original cause and those seeking to impose their own rule grew wider. Some Ascendants began to talk openly about reshaping the world into a new empire, where they would rule with unquestionable power. Their arguments were persuasive. They had already defeated alien invaders and gained control over reality itself. What was stopping them from ruling as gods? Cassandra, driven by a sense of duty, knew this was not the path humanity should take. She still clung to the hope that they could use their powers responsibly, to protect the weak and ensure the survival of Earth's culture. But the rebellion within her own ranks was more than just a matter of ideology. It was personal. Some of the Ascendants had once been her closest allies, people she had trusted. Now, they were turning against her, questioning her leadership and the values she had fought for. She felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her, as the mission became as much about saving humanity from the Ascendants themselves as from the alien invaders. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human resistance continued to fight an uphill battle. The Zarek had taken control of vast portions of the planet, turning major cities into fortresses. The human military, once a powerful force in its own right, was now reduced to guerrilla tactics, attempting to sabotage the invaders from the shadows. But their efforts were stifled by the growing presence of Zarek reinforcements, and their dwindling resources. As much as they longed to believe in the Ascendants' ability to turn the tide, many had begun to lose hope. The Ascendants' mission was becoming a race against time. They had to disable the dampening towers before the Zarek activated them, and before the fractures in their own ranks led to an all-out civil war among humanity's saviors. The journey to the Zarek capital was grueling. Alien forces constantly harried their progress, and the Ascendants' powers were pushed to their limits. With every victory came another betrayal, and soon Cassandra realized that they couldn't continue as they were. One faction, led by a powerful Ascendant named Theron, had begun openly defying her orders, deciding that they should strike the Zarek Queen directly and take the alien empire for themselves. Theron's faction argued that humanity could never truly be free from the Zarek until they took the fight to the heart of the invaders. They believed that the only way to stop the alien empire was to dismantle it from the inside and assume control. Cassandra, however, believed that by destroying the psychic dampening towers, they could sever the Zarek's hold over Earth and free the planet's inhabitants without resorting to further violence. The rift reached its peak when Theron and his followers launched a surprise attack on a Zarek stronghold, disobeying Cassandra's orders to wait for a coordinated strike. The battle was devastating, and although the Ascendants succeeded in inflicting significant damage, it resulted in a massacre. Thousands of human soldiers, caught in the crossfire, were killed. Cassandra was devastated. Not only had she lost lives, but she had lost the respect of a portion of her own people. There was no turning back from this. With the mission now in jeopardy and time running out, Cassandra made the painful decision to confront Theron and his faction. The Ascendants who had once fought together as a single force were now divided, and Cassandra feared that if they didn't reconcile their differences soon, they would doom humanity's future forever. A tense confrontation between Cassandra and Theron ensued in the heart of the Zarek capital, where the Ascendants faced not just the threat of alien forces but the larger battle within themselves. The war had transcended beyond the question of alien invasion. It was now a war for humanity's soul. Theron's eyes burned with the fire of revolution. You think we're supposed to protect humanity? But what if we could rule it instead? You've become weak, Cassandra. You're trying to preserve a broken world. I'm giving them a new future. Cassandra's voice was steady, though her heart was heavy. We can't rule with fear, Theron. If we become what they were, what the Zarek were, we're no better than the invaders we fought against. Theron's smirk was cold. The world isn't kind, Cassandra. We have to be ruthless to survive. As the Ascendants prepared for battle, a new realization dawned on Cassandra. She wasn't just fighting to stop the Zarek, she was fighting to prevent humanity from becoming the very thing it had fought against. The war was no longer just about survival, it was about the kind of world humanity would build from the ashes of the old. The question remained, could they stay united long enough to save Earth? Or would the Ascendant's thirst for power tear them, and humanity, apart? The air was thick with tension as Cassandra's faction and Theron's rebels stood at odds. The heart of the Zarek capital, a sprawling labyrinth of crystalline spires and alien technology, seemed to hum with an energy that resonated deep within the Ascendants. Cassandra could feel it, this was no ordinary battlefield. It was as if the very ground beneath them was alive, pulsating with power. Power that had once been the key to humanity's salvation, and now, its potential damnation. Theron, standing before her with a hardened glare, was unyielding. His faction of Ascendants, once her comrades, now stared at her with contempt. They believed in the mission, but their vision of the future had twisted into something darker. Where Cassandra saw the preservation of humanity's soul, they saw an opportunity to forge a new empire, an empire ruled by those who had ascended beyond mere mortals. They had tasted the power of gods, and now they craved more. Cassandra's voice broke the silence. This is madness, Theron. Do you really think we can rule with power like this and not become the very thing we fought against? The Zarek believed themselves superior, and look where it got them. Theron's lips curled into a cruel smile. They believed they were gods because they had the strength to claim it. You're weak, Cassandra. You're holding us back. We've transcended the old world. It's time for something new, something better. For a moment, it seemed as though the words had reached him, but his next command shattered that illusion. Theron raised his hand, and his faction responded. A psychic wave shot out from them, a brutal force that reverberated through the capital, disrupting the Zarek forces in a cacophony of screams and chaos. The battle for control of the alien empire had begun. Cassandra's Ascendants, though caught off guard by the sheer aggression of Theron's group, rallied. They had fought side by side, and the bonds between them were strong enough to weather even the most devastating of betrayals. But as the psychic storm raged, Cassandra realized the true cost of their internal division. The Zarek capital was falling apart, and they were doing nothing but adding to the destruction. Her heart sank as the realization struck, she had been too slow to stop the fracture in their ranks. Too hesitant to make the hard choice to end the rebellion before it spread like wildfire. Now, the Ascendants were no longer fighting just to save Earth, they were fighting over its future, and the path they chose could very well decide the fate of every human left alive. It was then that the first of the Zarek psychic dampening towers flickered to life, their massive forms rising from the depths of the capital's core. The alien technology hummed with an eerie light, its dark aura spreading outward, erasing the Ascendant's psychic abilities and rendering them vulnerable. Cassandra's power, her connection to the energy of the universe, flickered, then vanished. What have you done, Theron? Cassandra's voice trembled as she saw the towers activate, the psychic shields enveloping the battlefield. The Ascendant's advantage, their power, was gone in an instant. The aliens' countermeasure had worked. Theron turned, his eyes cold and calculating. I've done what's necessary. I've ensured that no one can stop us now. The Zarek may have thought they could control us, but we will use their technology to build our own destiny. The rest of the Ascendants, torn between loyalty to Cassandra and the promise of ultimate power offered by Theron, hesitated. The battle had paused, as both factions stood frozen, the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. Cassandra, battered and on the edge of losing everything, gathered her remaining strength. Without her psychic abilities, she felt weaker than she ever had before, but she refused to give in. She couldn't allow Theron's vision to become reality, not when she believed there was still a chance for humanity to rise above the darkness that had consumed the invaders. What you're proposing, Cassandra began, her voice rising over the chaos, is nothing but a cycle of destruction. We'll become like them, like the Zarek. Power alone is not enough to lead a people. We must remember who we are. We are human, not gods. Theron's eyes narrowed. I disagree. If we have the power to shape the world, then we are its rightful rulers. Humanity deserves more than the broken remnants of what came before. At that moment, a new presence arrived. The Zarek Queen, long thought to be a figure of myth, materialized from the shadows. Her crystalline form glowed with an intensity that seemed to defy all natural laws. She had been observing the conflict from afar, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Foolish humans," the Zarek Queen's voice echoed, a deep, resonating tone that seemed to reverberate through the very air. "You seek power, but you fail to understand its true cost. The ascendant transformation was always a double-edged sword. You have become stronger, yes, but you have also become something else, something that will never be satisfied." Cassandra turned to face the Queen, determination flaring within her. "We will not let you turn us into your pawns. We may be flawed, but that's what makes us human. We fight for something greater than power." The Queen's laughter filled the air. "You don't understand. You are already too far gone. The very essence of your ascension is what will destroy you. Your hunger for power will consume you from within, and in the end, you will be the ones to wipe out humanity." The Zarek Queen's psychic influence surged, attempting to break the will of the Ascendants. Cassandra could feel the weight of her words, but deep down, she knew the truth: this was no longer about survival. It was about the kind of future they would leave behind. A sudden explosion rocked the capital, shaking the very foundations of the alien stronghold. A group of human rebels, led by the remnants of Earth's resistance forces, had arrived, launching a final assault on the Zarek Queen's stronghold. They had no psychic abilities, no ascendant enhancements, but they had something more important: hope. As the battle raged on, Cassandra and Theron stood at the precipice of the war's final chapter. The Ascendants were no longer united, and the forces of the Zarek Queen were closing in. Humanity was on the brink, and the question of whether they would rise or fall remained unanswered. The breaking point had arrived. And only one thing was certain: what happened next would change the course of human history forever. The battlefield was chaos. Explosions echoed through the Zarek capital, shaking its crystalline towers, while human resistance forces clashed with the alien invaders. Without psychic abilities to tip the scales, the humans fought with nothing but determination and ingenuity. Despite their lack of advanced weaponry, they were relentless, leveraging guerrilla tactics and the element of surprise. It was a moment of unexpected unity, a last-ditch effort to secure Earth's future. For Cassandra and Theron, however, the battle was no longer just about defeating the Zarek, it was about deciding who would shape the world that emerged from the ruins. The two factions of Ascendants, once united in purpose, now stood as opposing forces on the precipice of humanity's rebirth or its downfall. Cassandra, with her heart heavy and her resolve unwavering, watched the human resistance charging toward the heart of the capital. Despite the psychic dampening towers, they were pushing forward, refusing to accept that they were powerless. Cassandra knew what she had to do: she had to end the conflict once and for all. But the question remained: could she reconcile the warring factions of the Ascendants before it was too late? Theron's faction, meanwhile, continued to press their advantage, using their remaining powers to tear through the Zarek forces. But there was an undercurrent of desperation in their movements. Power, they realized too late, was not enough to win a war that had transcended mere combat. They were battling for a future that could no longer be envisioned through the lens of domination. As the resistance forces closed in on the Zarek Queen's stronghold, Cassandra's eyes locked with Theron's. She could feel the tension between them, the years of camaraderie now frayed beyond recognition. The thought of having to confront him, to take down the man she once trusted, pained her more than any alien invader ever could. "We can't keep doing this," Cassandra shouted over the cacophony of battle. "The war isn't between us, Theron. It's between us and the Zarek. You've seen it, too. We've lost our way." Theron's response was cold. "I'm not blind, Cassandra. But you're weak. You're trying to save a world that doesn't deserve saving. We've ascended beyond humanity's limitations. Power is the only way forward. Power alone isn't the answer." Cassandra countered, her voice trembling with frustration. "It's what the Zarek thought too. It's what they became. We are human, Theron. We've always been more than our powers. We have to lead by our hearts, not our ambitions. Theron's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Cassandra saw a flicker of doubt, before it was replaced with fury. You are a fool, Cassandra. The Zarek couldn't control us. But I will. I will shape the future. And I'll do it without your weakness holding me back. Without another word, Theron raised his hand, unleashing a psychic storm that could shatter the entire capital. The air crackled with energy, bending and warping in response to his will. But this time, Cassandra was ready. She was no longer just a leader fighting for the survival of humanity, she was fighting for the very soul of her people. In one swift motion, Cassandra reached out with the remaining power she could muster, clashing with Theron's storm in a battle of wills. Their psychic forces collided, sending shockwaves throughout the capital, shaking the very foundation of the Zarek Empire. The clash between their powers threatened to tear apart the building they stood on, but Cassandra refused to back down. You've gone too far, she growled, her eyes blazing. If you continue down this path, you'll destroy humanity as we know it. We were meant to ascend together, not to become tyrants. Theron's gaze softened for a split second, and for a fleeting moment, Cassandra believed he might listen. But then his expression hardened again, and the psychic onslaught intensified. The Zarek Queen, sensing the chaos, stepped forward. Her crystalline form shimmered with the dark energy she had accumulated over centuries. She had been manipulating the ascendants from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now, with the two factions of ascendants distracted by their conflict, she saw her chance. You fools, she purred, her voice like the sound of breaking glass. You've wasted your time fighting each other while you should have been united against me. I control the future, not you. But Cassandra, though weakened, would not relent. With one final surge of will, she pushed back against Theron's storm, breaking free from the mental conflict between them. She focused all her remaining power on the Zarek Queen, using every ounce of psychic energy to disrupt the aliens' hold over the capital's systems. The psychic dampening towers flickered, then collapsed. The Queen screamed in fury, her form disintegrating under the combined pressure of the Ascendant's forces. Her control over the capital shattered, leaving the Zarek forces vulnerable. The Queen, who had thought herself the true ruler of Earth's future, was finally dethroned. As the dust settled, Cassandra turned back to Theron. His expression was one of rage, but there was also something else, regret. Perhaps, deep down, he had known that this moment would come. That the path he had chosen was one that could only lead to ruin. You've made your choice, Cassandra said quietly, her voice filled with sorrow. And so have I. Theron stood motionless, his psychic power flickering in and out of control. The ascended form that had once been so stable now seemed to falter, unstable. The battle had taken its toll on both of them. The war was not just between Earth's defenders and the invaders, it had been a war for the very essence of what humanity would become. But it was not over yet. The Zarek forces were reeling, their control broken. The resistance forces had arrived, and their victory was imminent. Cassandra knew that, despite the personal loss, Earth was finally free. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had the chance to rebuild, to reclaim the world they had lost. And this time, they would do it together, not as gods, but as the flawed, resilient species that had defied extinction. With the Queen's death, the last of the Zarek Empire crumbled. The Ascendants stood amidst the wreckage of the alien stronghold, the echoes of their battle ringing in their ears. And in that silence, they knew, the true war was over. The question that remained was what they would do with the future they had won. With the Zarek Queen's death, the capital began to crumble into silence. The psychic dampening towers fell, their dark energy dispersing like dissipating fog, leaving a world that was no longer under the control of alien invaders. The final remnants of the Zarek Empire were defeated, and the human resistance, battered but resilient, swept through the fallen stronghold. Earth, for the first time in years, had a chance to breathe again. But Cassandra knew that victory came with an irreversible cost. She had led her people through the chaos of war, through a war that had not only been fought against invaders but within themselves. The Ascendants, once a united force, were now divided, fractured by ambition, loyalty, and the very powers they had come to wield. Standing amid the wreckage of the Zarek capital, Cassandra felt the weight of her decisions. The battle with Theron had been necessary, but it had cost her a piece of herself. Their clash had left both Ascendants severely weakened, their powers drained, their psychic energies fractured. The aftershocks of their psychic battle rippled across the planet, leaving humanity's future uncertain. As the last of the Zarek forces retreated into the dark corners of the galaxy, it became clear that the true challenge had only just begun. What now for Earth? What would humanity become, now that it was free from its invaders and their alien technology? The Ascendants, now scattered, still carried the weight of godlike abilities, abilities that had torn them apart in the first place. Humanity was free, but at a steep price. Cassandra was acutely aware that in the aftermath of the war, Earth would need to rebuild, not just its cities, but its identity. The question on everyone's mind was whether humanity could remain true to its ideals or whether the same lust for power that had nearly destroyed them would rise again. For Cassandra, the path forward seemed almost impossibly complex. As she watched the remnants of the Ascendants gather, she realized that she could no longer hold on to the hope that they could all be united under a single banner. Theron, once her closest ally, had been consumed by his vision of domination. The others, though loyal to her cause, were lost in the aftermath, unsure of where their place in the world now lay. But she had to try. Cassandra called together the surviving Ascendants, their powers still flickering weakly from their earlier confrontation. The energy in the room was palpable, thick with unresolved tension and raw emotion. Some of them, their eyes full of longing for the power they had once held, stood in silence. Others, their faces etched with the fatigue of war, sat stoically, unwilling to speak of their doubts. She stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with the weight of her experience. The war is over, but our fight is not. We have won Earth's freedom, but now we must decide what comes next. We have the power to rebuild, to forge a future that is greater than anything we could have imagined. But that future can only be one where we remain human, where we do not become the very thing that nearly destroyed us. There was a long silence as the Ascendants looked at her, their expressions guarded. Some were still torn, caught between their desire to use their powers for good and the temptation to reshape the world in their own image. Finally, one of the Ascendants spoke, a woman named Isolde, her voice soft but firm. Cassandra, we saw what Theron wanted. We saw the power he sought. Are we to stand by and let him win, or will we take the opportunity to remake Earth in our own image? Cassandra looked her in the eye, her expression unwavering. If we choose to become like the Zarek, we will become just as they were, tyrants who ruled through fear. We are not gods. We are human. Our strength lies not in our power, but in our ability to come together, to build something better. There were murmurs of agreement and dissent. The rift between the Ascendants was far from healed, and the weight of what they had done to each other could not be easily undone. But in that moment, Cassandra saw something in their eyes, a flicker of understanding. It wasn't too late. Elsewhere, on the surface of Earth, humanity's rebuilding had already begun. Cities that had been ravaged by war were slowly being restored, but the human spirit was what needed mending the most. Earth's people, from every corner of the globe, worked side by side to reclaim their planet, pooling their knowledge and resources to heal the planet's scars. The war had left them bruised and broken, but they were determined to forge a new world, one free of alien invaders and the corruption of unchecked power. But as the world began to heal, a new question emerged: how would humanity guard against the temptation of the power they had once wielded? The Ascendants, aware of their own weaknesses, now became a symbol of both hope and caution. Cassandra knew that they could never again allow such power to fall into the wrong hands. They had transcended, but only at the cost of their humanity. The true challenge would not be in rebuilding their cities or their technology, but in rebuilding their hearts. Humanity's future depended on their ability to temper their ambition with compassion, to wield their powers with wisdom, and to remember what it meant to be truly human. And so, Cassandra began a new mission, a mission to teach, to guide, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The Ascendants would serve as guardians, not rulers. They would work to maintain balance, to ensure that no one would ever again be tempted to seize power at the cost of humanity's soul. But even as Cassandra looked toward the future, she knew that the true test of humanity was still to come. There would always be those who sought to exploit their abilities, to harness their power for their own gain. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, and the road to redemption would be long and difficult. But for the first time, humanity had hope. And hope was something that no alien invader or godlike power could ever take away. The dawn of rebirth had arrived. Years passed, and the world that had once teetered on the brink of destruction began to flourish again. Earth, scarred by the ravages of war and the clash of civilizations, was healing. The cities rose from their ruins, rebuilt with the determination of a people who had fought and bled to reclaim their home. The wounds of the Zarek invasion, though deep, were starting to close. But it was not just the land that was being rebuilt, it was humanity itself. Cassandra had not only survived the war but emerged as something more than a leader. She had become a symbol of hope, a beacon for the future. The Ascendants, once divided by their powers and ambitions, had found a new purpose. They were no longer gods or tyrants, but stewards of humanity's future. They had learned, painfully, that their strength came not from their abilities but from their ability to protect and guide the very people they had once sought to dominate. The Ascendant Council, a coalition of the strongest minds and hearts among their ranks, was established to maintain balance. They were the final safeguard against any one person or faction ever gaining too much power. Their first order of business had been to dismantle the remaining pieces of the Zarek technology that had so nearly corrupted them. No longer would humanity be tempted by the dangerous allure of godlike power. They had seen its cost, and they would never again risk losing their humanity. Despite the ascendancy of Earth's people, Cassandra knew that the temptation of power would always be there. There were always those who sought to exploit, who believed that humanity was destined to rule the stars. Yet, for the first time in their history, the people of Earth had made the decision to chart their own course, not as conquerors, but as explorers. It was not domination they sought, but understanding. They had tasted the bitter fruit of empire, and they would never go down that path again. A new space program was formed, not to wage war on distant planets, but to explore, to learn, and to ensure that no force could ever again threaten Earth. The Ascendants, using their abilities, helped to navigate humanity's entry into a galaxy that was still full of mysteries, still full of dangers, but one that offered the possibility of peaceful coexistence, if only they were wise enough to seek it. But peace, as Cassandra knew, was fragile. It had to be nurtured, fought for, and preserved. The human race, though scarred, was stronger than it had ever been. And it had learned that true strength was not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to protect. Earth's children, the next generation, grew up in a world where stories of the Zarek, the Ascendants, and the war that had nearly destroyed them were passed down like sacred texts. The lessons of the past were taught not as a warning of what humanity could become, but as a guide for what it must never become again. The Ascendants became both mentors and protectors, guiding humanity into a future where they would not be the rulers of the stars, but their stewards. There were those who still believed in the old ways. Factions rose, both on Earth and beyond, who sought to harness the Ascendants' power for their own gain. But Cassandra, now older and wiser, stood at the forefront of the resistance against any who would use the old weapons of war. Her fight had changed. It was no longer about defeating invaders or battling within her own ranks, it was about preserving the ideals that had made humanity worth saving in the first place. And then, one fateful day, a new threat appeared. A ship, an unknown vessel, appeared on the fringes of Earth's solar system. It was massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever seen, its dark form illuminated only by the distant stars. It was not a Zarek ship, nor was it any species humanity had encountered. It was a harbinger of something unknown. Cassandra felt the tremor of its arrival deep within her. Her instincts flared, and for a moment, she feared that all their hard-won peace was about to be undone. But this time, humanity would not respond with violence. they would respond with curiosity. The Ascendants, including Cassandra, gathered in the council chambers, waiting. The leaders of Earth's nations, the surviving resistance forces, the young and the old, together, they stood ready to face this unknown threat. But Cassandra felt a sense of resolve settle within her. They had fought for their survival, fought for their humanity. Now, they would fight for understanding. The ship's arrival was not an invasion. It was a question, a message from the stars. A message from those who had watched humanity's journey, from the first steps of destruction to their eventual rise. Whoever they were offering a chance to join something greater than the stars they had once sought to conquer. And so, as the ship hovered above Earth, the Ascendants, the Council, and the people of Earth stood united. They had learned the true lesson of their war: power was not the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in humanity's journey. One that, this time, would be written not with bloodshed, but with wisdom. The future was uncertain, but humanity was ready. No longer would they be the empire that sought to rule, they would be the species that sought to understand, to grow, and to rise, together. And with that unity, they would meet whatever came from beyond the stars. Humanity had defied extinction. They had become something more than what the Zarek could ever have imagined. And now, the true test of their strength was about to begin. The legacy of humanity had just begun.